Understanding and acceptance are key to healing from this type of relationship. Mind-fuckery and Stockholm Syndrome are at the root, also known as cognitive dissonance and trauma bonding. And even bigger than understanding what happened is understanding what happens if you don't consolidate the thoughts or break the trauma bond. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. What happens if you don't break the cycle? And ask, who is really running your life? I'll also give you some tips that are going to help you heal and free yourself from the cycle. Hello, my name's Elizabeth Goddard. I'm author of Finding Lily and the A to Z of Emotional Abuse. On this channel, I talk about healing from emotional abuse and divorcing both emotionally and physically from the abuser. If you're new to the channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're returning, welcome back and thank you. And thank you to everyone who's been subscribing over the last few weeks and months. It's amazing. Thank you so much for your support. Two very special topics that I talk about a lot are cognitive dissonance and particularly trauma bonding. The reason I talk about them is they are so very important. A cognitive dissonance makes you spiral, and the trauma bonding keeps you attached and trapped. The cycle of abuse is a vessel, and the abuser moves you from idealization to devaluation, back to idealization to devaluation to discard to idealization, and they get you addicted to hormones which have you chasing them and their attention just to get that hit. And this is why I want you to ask, who is running my life? When you need to reach out and contact them, who is wanting to do that? If you really thought about what happened and fully understood what happened to you, and you still have a need for their attention, where is that coming from? I will come to that part later. The trauma bond is like tendrils, not just one, but a few of them, maybe more than that. Some bigger than others. Some are easier to sever, but to get to this, and before you discover who's running your life, you need to get help with the cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is holding two opposing thought patterns at the same time. A lot of people use smoking as an example. Everyone knows that smoking's bad for your health, but people still do it. Anyone who's experienced it in an emotionally abusive relationship will know what a really bad example this is. Cognitive dissonance is traumatizing, where your brain cannot understand something. It isn't computing. It's like a small child asking the question, but why, over and over and over again. And this is where you can get stuck. You can see the bad behavior, but you're stuck still believing the image or the false self they presented at the beginning of the relationship. But they loved me. How could they do this? They wouldn't do this to me. And your mind is trying to reason with what happened and what you were told and who was in that relationship. As a child, you may have discovered or were told that Father Christmas wasn't real. You might have put your hands over your ears, not wanting to hear the news. As you're growing up, you might have questioned whether it was true, asking how reindeers fly or how he manages to buy or make all the presents. Or you might have challenged your parents who didn't hide the gifts very well. The child gradually starts asking questions. Things don't make sense to them. And as they grow, they understand why. You, on the other hand, were not given that. You might have asked questions about the relationship and you were given an answer. And when you went down the route of, but why, because things just didn't make sense, you were told it was all your fault or that your intuition was wrong, that you were the problem. And even when you realise it's all over and they were lying and the programming was so deep, you got no closure. You can't untangle these thoughts. Your programming also included multiple discards where they would come back and they tell you how amazing you are. And they were sorry and they would never do it again. And this was a pattern, so part of your brain may also be waiting for them to return. Your brain is still anaesthetized. It's hiding in its shell to protect what hasn't been damaged. And your hormones have you swinging backwards and forwards. You can one moment understand who they are and what they have done, only for the next to be questioning it and remembering all the good times you had together. What a nice person they presented. When you're in a place that remembers the good times, you're still hooked to the wounds they showed you. So keep tuning into your body and asking who is running this. Your emotions will swing like a pendulum back and forth, and they will tell your inner child or your inner self that the person you thought they were doesn't exist. Or a situation arises and you question if they were right all along and this was your fault. You will need to prove to part of yourself who the abuser actually is when these emotions take over you. Both the trauma bond and cognitive dissonance are survival mechanisms. And if you're aware of the 4 Fs, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, you might recognise them. This is about preserving your life. The fight and flight stress responses assess the area that you're in, the threat that surrounds you, and then makes a judgment if you have enough time and energy to run away from the danger, or whether you are able to stay and fight. Hormones are released, and this is all done without you thinking. These are unconscious thoughts. And the fawn and the freeze are for the same reason, to preserve your life. So you might find yourself talking your way out of a threat or trying to calm down a situation that is perceived as life-threatening. Or you might go into freeze and you literally are frozen to the spot. You can't move. Animals use this response to play dead. Their attacker sees no value to them. When you're experiencing cognitive dissonance, your mind can spin out of control, rationalizing the person you believed them to be with the facts that you are now facing. Asking so many questions and then crumbling with the emotions. Did they really love you? Was your life really a lie? You were the only person that really understood them. How then can they just walk away from you? Who are they with? What are they doing? How can this be? And you are then watching someone else step into your shoes, living your life. But you recall back to the love they showed you. And then the facts are before you. If the gaslighting didn't turn you crazy, this could push you over the edge. Think of a bowl of water. If you pick the bowl up unevenly, the water then pushes out at both sides and it comes back together in the middle. It comes crashing together and it makes a mess and you get wet. This is cognitive dissonance. So the earlier that you can realize this is what's happening to you, the easier it might be to get out of that thought process. If you find you're in the midst of this spiral of emotions, try taking some deep breaths and try grounding yourself. It becomes easier to break. Keep reminding yourself of who they are and what they did. Writing is cathartic. Writing by hand is pure magic, letting out the nib and releasing all those thoughts and emotions across the page. And it doesn't matter if you can't read it afterwards. What situations do you remember that remind you of who they really are? For every action, there is a reaction. For every thought you have, create an opposing one. But they loved me. What did they do to counteract that thought? And then list every statement you have. They would never treat me that way or do that to me. And yet here you are in pain. What did they destroy of yours? What have they done to you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially? And if you can, for your own sanity, go no contact. This will create a vacuum of peace until the cravings start. And when they do, ask what or who needs to reach out and contact them. And then ask why. And then go and do your list again of who they are and what they have done. Breathe through this and ground yourself. This is a chemical reaction and it will not last if you stop feeding it. You're a means of supply to them. Seeing you in pain shows how powerful they were. You're topping them up. You're fueling them. So cutting off that supply means that they will move on and find it from somewhere else. If that thought spins you into an emotional vortex, again, breathe and ground and go back to your list. If your best friend from childhood did some of the things that your ex has done, would you still be friends? If your neighbour did the same things as your ex, would you still speak to them? It is hard when something happens and your ex is the person that you would have told, or maybe you need assistance, you've got a flat tyre and you would have called them, and now nothing. It becomes very lonely. So I'll put a link to my video on loneliness in the description below. And if you're still in contact because of the children or for the divorce process, you might see glimpses of who they were or the person they wanted you to believe they were. And you might experience cognitive dissonance, again wondering if you got it all wrong. Go back to your list and see if you can remember the moments when you discovered this information. And if you keep doing this, the two opposing thoughts catch up with each other and they don't clash, or the moments are much less. So instead, when the water is mixing together or coming together in the bowl, it's just a ripple. It is your responsibility to do something about your healing. The abuser actually wants you to stay trapped. Anyone you've had a toxic relationship with wants you to stay here. They want you to stay stuck. It is your responsibility to heal your wounds. It isn't mine. It isn't any of your friends. It isn't your co-workers or your doctors or your counsellors. You have the ultimate responsibility. And don't try to rush things. There's no time limit on this. Keep it simple and focused. This doesn't have to be a life sentence or a diagnosis for your life. This is the place to heal and throw away the crutch. Your crutch is your story. Don't leave with your wound. It's Caroline Myers who talks about woundology, leading with the wound. Have you heard about, and you go into the story of what happened. Don't get stuck. Breathe through the emotions and ground yourself. Use some self-care. Create a safe space. A place where you can meditate or read or journal. A place that indicates to your body it can relax and you're not looking over your shoulder or constantly on alert. You might start to notice patterns not just in romantic relationships, but in your family, in friends or people at work. As you start to relax your body, you will start to allow your brain to relax and it should function a little better. You might not overreact to situations or words, but the trauma bond is still there and you should be able to start untangling from the tendrils. The bond is driven by craving for hormones. We develop bonds for survival in childhood, usually with our caregiver, who is the foundation of our attachment. When our safety is threatened in some way, we turn to them for support and protection. Trauma bonding is one of the reasons it's so hard to heal from toxic and emotionally abusive relationships. The damage caused puts you in a state of confusion, and you had no idea this abuse was taking place. Bonding happens in relationships, all types of relationships, but this bonding was one-sided, and this is why it's so easy for them to walk away, as they didn't bond with you. When our safety is threatened in some way, we turn to our tribe for support and protection, and these bonds can be created within hours. It's a process that makes people more important to each other, and we develop bonds for survival. This is why team building exercises use scenarios and techniques that help instill trust in each other. Bonds are made during activities that are unique to the individuals. People who have experienced a traumatic situation together will always have a bond of survival. It's a very strong connection, and it strengthens when we spend time with someone, when we make love to them, and when we have children together. Trauma bonding is used by the emotional abuser or toxic person to enable them to gain power and control over you, positioning themselves as the caregiver, manufacturing a love that you may never have experienced before. They then started devaluing you with slight put-downs and triangulation or gaslighting. You may have rationalised their behaviour, believing they cared about you, creating even more bonding. And this is why, the reason that you're so connected to them. When the relationship ended, you wondered how you would survive. Trauma bonding made it hard to enforce boundaries, which is why it's so painful to stay away from them. After getting you addicted to oxytocin and dopamine through the love bombing, they started to introduce situations that release stress hormones, the fight, flight, fawn, freeze. And this was done with slight put downs and creating drama, manufacturing these emotions of jealousy. And when they threatened your safety through their bad behaviour, you turned to them for help and protection. You rationalised this behaviour, believing they cared about you. And this is why you feel so connected to them. When the relationship finished, your stress levels are so high, you experience fear, and you can't imagine living without them. They, on the other hand, play the victim. And you very likely believed this was all your fault. And the pain that you're in now, the pain that you feel, runs deep into your soul. Trauma bonding is a survival mechanism for extreme situations like abusive relationships. When a hostage is kidnapped or abuse victim develops a loyalty, it's known as Stockholm Syndrome. It's a perceived threat to the victim's life, an act of perceived kindness, isolation from outside forces, perceived inability to escape. The Stockholm Syndrome term was coined by a Swedish psychiatrist and criminologist called Nils Bergerot. I think I pronounced that correctly. He was involved in a case following a bank robbery that went wrong in Stockholm in August 1973. The robber held 4 bank employees hostage for 6 days. As part of the negotiations, he was able to request a friend join him. The two then bonded with the hostages, who in turn acted to protect their captors, despite being repeatedly threatened by them. Breaking the bond is as hard as balancing the dissonance. It's looking at the wounds you have been left with and healing them. It means tracking them down to the original wound. The emotions we feel are trapped trauma. We experience them over and over again until we remove them completely from our bodies. We need to get to the core of these issues, to the root cause. And much like a verruca, if any part of that root is left, it will lie dormant until it's triggered again. It's important to remember that people return on average to these relationships 7 to 8 times. That's why healing the wounds is crucial to moving forward and experiencing healthy relationships. And you might still be in the trauma bond if you're still experiencing or wanting the abuser to reach out to you. If you're wanting to reach out to them to prove how well you're doing without them. If you're posting on social media hoping they'll see it, you still might be experiencing the bond if you can't see what they did was abuse. If you still have hope for a future with the abuser, or if you're still defending them or justifying their behaviour in some way. Or you're disguising your wounds and getting involved in other people's drama as a distraction. You might have seen the red flags at the beginning of the relationship, but this was familiar to you. So when other people asked you why you were putting up with their behaviour, you didn't see anything wrong with it. On some level, you've experienced this before, usually in childhood where most of our programming takes place. As a child, the love you received might have been conditional. And I will put the links to my videos on scapegoats in the box below. Notice now who you are attracting into your life. Who are you accepting and tolerating? Remember, you have control of who you let in and who you let stay. When you start breaking the trauma bond, you will start to notice the control and manipulation tactics, and you will start to listen to and trust your gut, your second brain. And again, I will also put the link to that video in the description box below. As people start to reveal themselves, you start to cut off ties. You will no longer foster people until they find their forever homes or want to heal others. Breaking the trauma bond is stepping into your sovereign power. It isn't teaching others how to behave. And I will also put the link to that video below. When you understand why and how cognitive dissonance and the trauma bond keep you trapped, you can take steps to free yourself. And if you don't understand or don't want to understand, there's a high chance you will keep attracting the abusers in different forms, at work, in friendships, in other romantic relationships. And if you're praying that this never happens to you again, you can do something about it to ensure that it doesn't. This can be a confusing time. Your reality has been turned on its head, and each time this happens, remember, you need to breathe and you need to ground yourself. You can take control of the fact and a fiction, and you can transmute that pain into something constructive. Ask yourself, who's running these emotions? What age do you feel this person is? Is it you now, or at the age the relationship started? Or are they the emotions of a younger person? Are they yours? Have they been given to you from someone else? Healing the cognitive dissonance and breaking the trauma bond is divorcing from the emotional abuser. It means they no longer have control over you. Anytime you hear from them or hear about them, you feel nothing. At the end of the relationship, the pain is excruciating. The emotional pain is like physical pain. Anyone never experiencing it will never fully understand what it is like. Divorcing emotionally means you've got nothing left. The pain has gone, and the need for them to text you or message you or reach out to you has gone. And it allows you to take control of your life, the one that you know is yours and not for others to dictate. I hope you found this video useful. If you'd like to find out more about working with me, clearing the wounds, healing the trauma, I'll put the link below in the description box. I'll also put the links to my books, Finding Lily and the A to Z of Emotional Abuse, along with my 2 free workbooks, Self-Care is Vital and Turn Broke and Broken into Your Superpower. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'm sending you loads and loads and loads of love.